Hi, scholars. Walter Bowne here. Uh, let's go through chapter one. I will go through chapter one with you. It's a very short chapter. A lot of important things happen in chapter one that sets the precedent for different imagery and the use of nature and all this good stuff. So let's go through chapter one, the prison door. All right. And here we have some renderings I found on the internet. You know, the prison door, the rose bush, very, very important symbol. Here's a very elaborate rose bush. I don't think this was the rose bush that Hawthorne was envisioning in his great story. But here's, again, these are just different renderings. Let's take a look at the text. All right. A throng of bearded men in sad-colored garments and gray steeple-crowned hats, intermixed with women, some wearing hoods and others bareheaded, was assembled in front of a wooden edifice, the door of which was heavily timbered with oak and studded with iron spikes. All right, so if you were to do a rhetorical analysis of this paragraph, what do you see going on? Okay, I highlighted some words: throng, sad, gray. Okay, so we're obviously in a story, the tone, this is going to be rather a sad, melancholy story, right? He comes right off out of the gate, right? Throng has a negative connotation. A connotation is the feeling a word has, right? And that's negative. A throng is a nasty version of the general word group. He could say a group of bearded men. No, 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 no. Throng is a negative connotation. All right, so if I said a throng of students rushed through the hallway, I am making a comment on that group, right? It's a throng, not a group, not an assembly. So words in English, of course, with any language, have feeling attached to it. The dictionary definition is the denotation. The connotation is the feeling a word conveys, right? They might have the same definition, throng and group and assembly, like serpent and snake, daddy and father, but connotation is so important. And when you're doing an analysis of the Scarlet Letter or any work, you want to look at the author's connotative language, right? And the feeling the author is conveying in the piece, whether it's poetry, prose, whatever, or drama, right? Of course, these people are sad. We know the Puritans, so these were not happy people. And of course, even their hats are church related because they're wearing steeple hats, like a church steeple, right? So Hawthorne does not think highly of these people. They wear sad garments, another harsh word for clothes. You know, he doesn't have to, he could say clothes, but he says garments, as if it's some sort of uniform in a way. And their hats are gray and church shaped, right? And we also see nature here being abused. In the very beginning, opening paragraph, nature, both timber and oak, have been penetrated with iron spikes, right? Nature does not create iron spikes. Human beings create iron spikes. And those iron spikes are being driven into what's natural. So what is good and natural has been violated by man's iron. Okay, let's continue with this piece, all right? New paragraph. The founders of a new colony, whatever utopia of human virtue and happiness they might originally project, have invariably recognized it among their earliest practical necessities to allot a portion of the virgin soil as a cemetery and the other portion as the site of a prison. So we have beautiful parallel structure here. He's making a comment, a satirical comment about a utopia. They may have come here to create a city on the hill, to create a utopia, but the first thing they had to do was build a jail and make a cemetery. All right, so the author mocks this idea of a utopia with really the phrase, whatever utopia, right? Or whatever you call yourself, right? That kind of thing. Of course, the word recognize is a British version. They still spell it this way over in England. That changed, I believe, with Daniel Webster, not Daniel Webster, one of the Websters who created Webster's Dictionary, who wanted to make the English language less French and more American, right? Of course, we also have the word virgin soil. So again, virgin soil, what's natural, has been poisoned by this jail, right? And this cemetery. Hawthorne adds real names to the story to add authenticity. So the vicinity of Cornhill, Isaac Johnson's lot, these are all historical places and people that add veracity to the story. This is a work of fiction. A fiction writer needs to make it you believe, well, The word fictio means counterfeit, and that's where we get the word fiction from the Latin word fictio. But he needs to make it seem like this is a real story, and this really happened. So he adds real things to make it seem that way, right? We also know that religion is the nucleus of the family. These sepulchres are small rooms and monuments of the dead. And the sentence ends with King's Chapel, the churchyard around King's Chapel. Isn't it ironic, perhaps, that they were escaping the King of England, yet they still call it King's Chapel? Maybe they're thinking of it as Christ the King. I'm not sure. I just think it's a little ironic that they would call it King's Chapel. Maybe they still kind of identify as English citizens, even though they were separatists and they had to leave England. All right, let's continue. Certain it is that some 15 or 20 years after the settlement of the town, the wooden jail was already marked with weather stains and other indications of age, which gave a yet darker aspect to its beetle-browned and gloomy front. The rust on the ponderous ironwork of its oaken door looked more antique than anything else in the New World. Like all that pertains to crime, it seemed never to have known a youthful era. Before this ugly edifice, and between it and the wheel track of the street, was a grass plot, much overgrown with burdock and pigweed and apple pern and such unsightly vegetation, which evidently found something congenial in the soil that so early born the black flower of civilized society in prison. Okay, there is nothing subtle in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. The author wants you to know, and Scarlet Letter is famous for this, is the idea of authorial comment. The author intrudes his opinion into the piece. Oftentimes the author is vanished. So I'm just presenting information like a Hemingway short story. This is the antithesis of Hemingway. The author is telling you it's certain, right? It's certain, right? And this is the actual story and event. So this is the truth. And we can add 15, 20 years to the original colony. So without saying it's Boston 1640, he can say this jail is 15, 20 years old, and it was made at the time of the first settlers. So we can surmise 1640, give or take a decade or so. And we know nature despises this because it's a stain. It's staining this new jail because perhaps it disapproves. All right. Again, we can debate whether or not this is true or not. The word beetle means many things, being prominent and overhanging. A beetle is also a religious figure with a D. Also, as a noun, it's a heavy wooden hammering or ramming instrument. So again, not necessarily positive things. The iron already has rust on it. It looks antique even while new. That's ironic. And notice the authorial comment, like all that pertains. We know what he thinks of this jail. It never knew youth or beauty, and weeds grow all around it. Nature, as if a character in personification, does not approve of its existence. So nature gives us a black flower of civilization. Usually we think of civilization in the age of reason as being a place where God is. This is the Romantic era. Where men come, we get black flowers. If they weren't here, now we'd have rose bushes and nature and everything living in harmony. He also gives us the British spelling, which of course would be in vogue in 1850. And Hawthorne uses vivid imagery and personification to give this awful place a character, right? A place in society. All right, let's continue. But on one side of the portal, and rooted almost at the threshold, was a wild rose bush. Notice that adjective wild, covered in this month of June with its delicate gems, which might be imagined to offer their fragrance and fragile beauty to the prisoner as he went in, and to the condemned criminal as he came forth. Notice the parallel antithesis, to his doom, in token that the deep heart of nature could pity and be kind to him. All right, no one is going to be kind and offer pity to these criminals, these, quote, criminals, right? But nature will. And no one planted this rose bush, no human, no Puritan or separatist planted this, no pilgrim. It grew wild in June. So we have the setting, and you have these delicate gems. All right, so this is the immediate antithesis of the black flower. We have the black flower in one paragraph. The second paragraph gives us this wild rose bush, the one that nature has created on its own, because it wants to pity and be kind to these criminals, because these Puritans, these pilgrims, yeah, there's just no way they're kind. And even though their religion tells them they should, there's just no way they're hypocrites. So nature, again, is personified with the capital N, as we'll see in Emerson and in Thoreau. Notice the alliteration, the fragrance, and fragile. Both the petals of the flower are fragile, and also the beauty in the world is fragile. And it is only nature that offers pity and kindness, which is, again, highly ironic. All right, so let's finish. This rose bush, by strange chance, again, comment, has been kept alive in history. Oh, really? Has it? So says the author, but we want to believe him. But whether it merely survived out of a stern old wilderness so long after the fall of the gigantic pines and oaks that originally overshadowed it, or whether, as there is far authority for believing, it sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchinson as she entered the prison door, we shall not take upon us to determine. We have no idea whether it was this, whether it's that. It just continues to thrive. Finding it so directly on the threshold of our narrative, he's making reference to, yeah, I'm writing the story. We're on the threshold of this story, which is now about to issue from that inauspicious portal, that door that we're going to see Hester Prynne come out of. We could hardly do otherwise than to pluck one of the flowers and present it to the reader. Oh, God, thank you. It may serve, let us hope, to symbolize some sweet moral blossom. All right, we don't have to guess or debate. The reader is telling us what this flower represents. It represents a sweet moral blossom that gives kindness, gives pity, because this tale is so dark and there's so much human frailty and sorrow. Yet, at the end of the day, nature will give us what we need. So we go to nature to find our connection with God, because we're not going to find it in society. All right. So lots going on in this first chapter. We have direct authorial comment. The rose bush still lives. We have the tortured historical figure of Anne Hutchinson to add legitimacy, and may have had it bloom in her footsteps. So we have the supernatural. And of course, it represents hope and things like that. So if you guys see anything that you see, let me know. But hopefully this gives you, I talked for 12, 13 minutes about a very short paragraph or a short chapter. So when you do your symposiums, there's a lot to work with in these words, but you have to go through it and pick it apart, much like a surgeon or a medical student goes over a body, a cadaver, to look at all that what's happening in the beautiful work that we call literature. Thank you for listening. Bye. Hey guys, just to give you a little background historical information on these people that were named in Chapter 1. Isaac Johnson, as you can see here from Wikipedia, was one of the early, he was one of the largest shareholders in Massachusetts Bay Colony, one of the 12 men to sign the Cambridge Agreement in 1629. 1630, he sailed to America, arriving in Salem. So he's a famous colonist, right? We also have the sainted Anne Hutchinson, all right? So we have her. She was, there was a schism that broke out in the community. She didn't believe in what a lot of the ministers were saying about the works of the covenant, and she believed in the works of grace. So there was a schism in the church. And she was tried, convicted, thrown in jail, and eventually she was booted out of Massachusetts Bay Colony and went to another colony that she created. And today she's known as one of the early women's leaders that just stood up against authority. So again, Hawthorne would see her as being an emblem of a woman who challenges males, just like Hester challenges the Puritan society. So Anne Hutchinson is not here by accident, right? And there's a lot more we can talk about Anne Hutchinson, but I just give you a little idea about her. All right, scholars. So I was throwing around some terms, and by now you should know many of these terms that I used in this. Authorial comment, intrusive narrator, antithesis, symbolism, irony, personification, allusion, setting, connotation, denotation, alliteration, role of the supernatural, the pathetic fallacy. That's probably something new, using nature to reveal human emotion, like the rose bush. Or that it's raining during the crucible. All right, it's all pathetic fallacy. Tone, mood, subjectivity, objectivity. Obviously, this is subjective. We're not objective here, all right? It's subjective. The author is giving his or her opinion, his opinion, about what to think here. So you should know these terms, and we're going to be adding to these terms, but these are the terms I used for my presentation. So this is the jargon, and when you're AP scholars, you use the jargon.